जय माता दी दोस्तों, एक बार फिर से स्वागत है आप लोगों का एक नए व्लॉग में। मैं हूँ आपका दोस्त पारस और आज हम चलने वाले खाटू श्याम मंदिर। राजस्थान वाले में नहीं, हम चलेंगे खाटू श्याम दिल्ली धाम, क्योंकि हमने वहाँ अर्जी लगा रखी थी कि भाई बाबा गाड़ी मिल जाएगी तो आपको दर्शन करवाने आएंगे गाड़ी के भी। तो आज अपनी थार की अर्जी आज बाबा के चरणों में लगने वाली है। और साथ के साथ मैं लाया हूँ अभी को, अपनी बेटी को, जो उसकी सबसे फेवरेट और ड्रीम कार थी जो थी थार, वो उसी के कहने में मैंने ली है। आज अभी भी साथ है, बच्चे भी साथ है, तो चलेंगे आज सब बाबा श्याम के दर्शन करेंगे। और जो दिल्ली धाम खाटू श्याम के अंदर जो अपग्रेड हुआ है वो मैं आपको दिखाने वाला हूँ, बताने वाला हूँ। जो भी प्रॉपर एड्रेस है वही बताने वाला हूँ, गाड़ी कहाँ खड़ी होती है अभी बताने वाला हूँ। तो वीडियो पूरी देखना और एंड तक बने रहना है। जय श्री श्याम। तो हम पहुंच चुके हैं खाटू श्याम मंदिर और गाड़ी मैंने यहाँ पर कर दिया पार्क। पर मैंने जो गाड़ी पार्क की है कि मेन रोड पर, आप गाड़ी यहाँ भी खड़ी कर सकते हो, पर यहाँ पे आप गाड़ी पार्क करोगे तो आपका चालान कट जाएगा 600 रुपये का। तो आगे ना पार्किंग है।
There's a moment most people don't notice when it happens. It doesn't feel dramatic. There's no argument, no clear rejection. It's the moment you realize you've been trying to be chosen for longer than you're willing to admit. Not aggressively, not desperately, just quietly. You were present, available, consistent. You listened, you adjusted, you stayed. And somewhere along the way, being chosen stopped feeling like something that would happen and started feeling like something you had to earn. That's the moment everything shifts. Trying to be chosen doesn't feel wrong at first. In fact, it often feels mature. You tell yourself you're being patient, understanding, emotionally aware. You give people space, but not too much. You show interest, but not too strongly. You try to do everything right. And because nothing bad happens immediately, you assume you're moving in the right direction. But there's a problem hidden inside that logic. When you try to be chosen, you place yourself in a position of evaluation. You're no longer showing up as someone moving toward life. You're showing up as someone waiting to be approved. And the moment someone senses that, even subconsciously, the dynamic changes. Here's what almost no one tells you. People don't choose what feels guaranteed, they choose what feels alive. And aliveness doesn't come from effort, it comes from presence without attachment. But when you're trying to be chosen, your presence isn't neutral. It carries weight, expectation, hope, invisible pressure. Not pressure you apply outwardly, pressure you carry inwardly. And people feel that. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. Think back to a situation where you felt close to someone, but nothing ever moved forward. Conversation flowed, comfort was there, emotional access felt easy. From the outside, it looked like progress, but underneath, something was missing. Not connection, not communication, movement. Because movement requires polarity. And polarity disappears the moment one person starts orbiting the other. Trying to be chosen subtly places you in orbit. You adjust your timing to theirs, your energy to theirs, your expectations to theirs. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop leading your own emotional direction. This is where the illusion forms. You believe closeness means momentum, so you stay, you wait. You keep investing because leaving would feel like giving up. But what you're actually doing is confusing emotional proximity with emotional selection. They're not the same thing. Someone can feel close to you without feeling pulled toward you. Someone can enjoy your presence without ever feeling compelled to choose you. And when that happens, the longer you stay, the more invisible the imbalance becomes. Here's the uncomfortable part. Trying to be chosen feels safe because it avoids loss. As long as you're trying, nothing ends. There's no final answer, no clear rejection, just possibility. But possibility without movement isn't hope, it's suspension. And suspension slowly drains you. It keeps you emotionally invested without emotional return. Not because the other person is malicious, but because the structure of the dynamic allows it. At some point, something inside you gets tired. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. Tired of initiating. Tired of reading between lines. Tired of wondering whether today will finally be the day something changes. That tiredness is important. It's not weakness. It's awareness beginning to surface. Because the moment you feel that exhaustion, you're standing at a psychological crossroads. One path says, try harder, be better, be more. The other path says something quieter. What if I stopped? Stopping doesn't mean walking away immediately. It means you stop leaning forward emotionally. You stop offering clarity to situations that benefit from ambiguity. You stop proving your value to people who haven't earned access to it. And the strangest thing happens. Nothing collapses. There's no explosion, no confrontation. Instead, there's space. And space is revealing. When you stop trying to be chosen, you remove the cushion. You're no longer softening the dynamic with effort. And now, the truth has room to show itself. If someone steps forward in that space, you learn something real. If they don't, you also learn something real. But either way, you're no longer suspended. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer investing in a role that requires you to shrink your center just to remain included. This is the part that changes people. Not because it makes you colder, but because it returns your focus to where it belongs. Back to your direction, your standards, your internal alignment. You're no longer asking, will they choose me? You're asking something far more powerful. Do I like who I become when I'm here? That question reshapes everything.
And once you start asking it, you can't unsee the answer. Because before you can understand what changes when you stop trying to be chosen, you first have to see clearly what trying to be chosen was actually costing you. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens psychologically when effort disappears and why absence doesn't create distance, it creates truth. When you stop trying to be chosen, the first thing that appears is silence. Not the awkward kind, the revealing kind. Messages slow down, initiation shifts, the emotional rhythm changes, and for the first time, you're no longer filling the gaps with effort. This is where most people get uncomfortable, because absence feels like risk. But absence isn't what creates distance, it exposes what was already there. When you were always available, always responsive, always leaning in, you acted like emotional insulation. You softened uncertainty, you absorbed tension, you stabilized the dynamic, so nothing had to move. But when you stop doing that, the dynamic loses its cushion, and without that cushion, the truth has to surface. Here's the key distinction. Absence doesn't create desire. It reveals whether desire was present in the first place. If someone moves closer when effort disappears, attraction was already there. If they don't, what existed was access, not pull. And that difference matters, because access can feel meaningful while still being optional. Attraction doesn't feel optional. It creates movement on its own. This is why absence feels so powerful, not because it manipulates, but because it removes interference. You're no longer steering the outcome. You're no longer managing emotional temperature. You step back, and whatever happens next is real. Most people are surprised by what they see. Some notice that nothing changes. The other person stays exactly where they were. They don't reach out more. They don't lean in. They don't question the shift. They simply adjust. And that moment hurts, but it also clarifies something essential. It shows you that your presence was appreciated, but not required. Others notice something different. A message arrives sooner than expected. Questions appear. Energy shifts. Not dramatically, but noticeably. That response isn't about fear of loss. It's about awareness. Your absence breaks predictability, and predictability is the enemy of polarity. Polarity doesn't come from distance. It comes from contrast, from knowing that someone is grounded in their own direction. When you stop trying to be chosen, you stop orbiting. And the moment you stop orbiting, the dynamic has to rebalance. Either someone steps toward you, or the space widens. Both outcomes are honest. This is where people make a critical mistake. They interpret silence as rejection. But silence isn't rejection. It's data. It's information you couldn't access while you were cushioning the dynamic. Because effort hides imbalance, absence reveals it. Another shift happens internally. When you stop chasing, you stop scanning. You're no longer monitoring tone, response time, emotional temperature. Your nervous system settles, and when that happens, you show up differently, even without trying to. Less reactive, less eager, more centered. Not because you're withholding, but because you're no longer dependent on an outcome. That independence is felt, even when nothing is said. This is why people often say things like, "I don't know what changed, but the energy feels different." What changed wasn't behavior, it was orientation. You stopped leaning forward. And leaning forward is often mistaken for interest. But interest that leans too far turns into pressure. Not outward pressure, internal pressure. And people instinctively step away from pressure, even when they can't explain why. Absence removes that pressure. It gives the dynamic room to breathe. And breathing room either invites movement or confirms stillness, but it never lies. This is also why stopping the chase can feel unsettling, because you're no longer controlling the illusion. You're no longer extending possibility by staying emotionally invested. You're allowing reality to define itself. And reality doesn't always align with hope, but it always aligns with truth. Here's the deeper layer. When absence reveals disinterest, it doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means the connection was never anchored in mutual pull. It was sustained by effort. And effort without reciprocity always leads to depletion. Absence interrupts that cycle. By now you might be noticing something. This isn't about tactics, it's about orientation, about where your center of gravity lives. When it lives outside you, you chase. When it returns to you, the chase ends. And with it, the illusion ends too. Why you begin attracting different dynamics. Why some people disappear, and why that's not a loss. And how the need to be chosen slowly dissolves once you stop outsourcing your value. When you stop trying to be chosen, something unexpected happens. It's not external first, it's internal. You notice how much of your identity was built around anticipation, waiting, reading signals, staying available. You realize how often your mood shifted based on someone else's response. And once that awareness appears, it can't be ignored. Because you start seeing patterns you didn't notice before. You see how often you delayed decisions to keep a door open. How many times you muted your preferences to stay agreeable. How frequently you postponed your own direction because choosing yourself felt risky. Trying to be chosen wasn't just about relationships. It quietly shaped how you move through life. And when that effort stops, there's a gap. Not an empty gap, a revealing one. At first, the gap feels strange. You're no longer scanning for validation. You're no longer calibrating your energy to fit someone else's expectations. There's more mental space. And with that space comes a question most people avoid. What do I want when I'm not positioning myself to be wanted? That question changes everything. This is where the identity shift begins. You stop defining yourself by how well you're received. You stop measuring your value by responsiveness, approval, or access. Instead, your focus moves inward, not in a selfish way, but in a grounded way. You begin choosing before waiting to be chosen. And that single change reshapes how people experience you. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be chosen, you don't become less considerate. You become more precise. You listen, but you don't overextend. You care, but you don't collapse your boundaries. You show interest, but you don't abandon your center. And that precision creates a different kind of presence. Not louder, not colder, clearer. This clarity changes who stays. People who were comfortable with your constant availability start to fade. Not because you push them away, but because the dynamic no longer feeds on effort. And that can feel like loss. But it's not. It's filtration. At the same time, something else happens. Different people respond differently. Some lean in, not because you became distant, but because your energy no longer asks. It invites. An invitation feels different than pursuit. Invitation allows choice on both sides. Pursuit quietly removes it. This is why the identity shift can feel unsettling. You're no longer certain how people will respond. You don't know who will stay and who will drift. But that uncertainty is honest. And honesty creates alignment. Another subtle change emerges. You stop narrating yourself through other people's reactions. You're not constantly asking, "Did I say the right thing?" Was that too much? Should I follow up? Those questions fade, because your internal reference point moves back to you. You're no longer negotiating your worth. You're expressing it. This is the moment many people mistake for detachment. But it's not detachment. It's self-trust. Trust that if something requires you to chase, bend, or dilute yourself, it isn't aligned. And alignment doesn't need persuasion. There's a quiet confidence that forms here. Not the performative kind, the grounded kind. The kind that says, if this fits, it will move naturally. If it doesn't, I won't force it. That mindset isn't passive, it's powerful, because it removes desperation without removing depth. By now, you may notice your standards changing, not on paper, in practice. You become less impressed by emotional access alone. You start noticing reciprocity, direction, initiation, not as demands, but as indicators. You stop romanticizing effort. You start valuing ease that moves both ways. This is where identity stabilizes. You're no longer chasing validation. You're building alignment. And alignment attracts differently than effort ever could. It doesn't pull everyone. It pulls the right ones. For choice, for future connection. And why the day you stop trying to be chosen isn't the day you lose something. It's the day you stop giving yourself away to dynamics that were never meant to choose you.
By the time you stop trying to be chosen, something important has already happened. You're no longer confused. Not because everything worked out, but because you finally understand what was happening the entire time. You see that the chase was never about love. It was about uncertainty, about staying close to possibility instead of standing firmly in reality. And once that clarity arrives, you don't need dramatic decisions. The dynamic resolves itself. Here's what becomes clear. Love doesn't begin when someone finally notices your effort. It begins when two people move toward each other without coercion, without persuasion, without one person carrying the momentum while the other stays still. Anything else isn't romance, it's maintenance. When you stop trying to be chosen, you stop negotiating your value. You no longer interpret silence as mystery. You no longer confuse mixed signals with depth. You see them for what they are, a lack of direction. And direction matters more than intensity. Because intensity without direction burns you out. Direction without intensity eventually finds its rhythm. This is why the end of the chase doesn't feel dramatic. It feels clean. You stop asking, why didn't this work? And start seeing why this was never aligned. That shift alone saves years of emotional energy. Another quiet realization settles in. You didn't lose anyone by stopping the chase. You simply stopped over-investing in uncertainty. Anyone who required you to chase, wait, or shrink was never meeting you from a place of choice. They were meeting you from comfort. And comfort alone doesn't build a shared future. This is where many people fear they'll become closed off, but the opposite happens. You become more open, just not indiscriminately. You don't shut down, you filter. You don't harden, you clarify. And clarity creates safety without sacrificing attraction. When you meet someone new now, the questions change. You're no longer asking, how do I keep this? You're asking, how does this feel when I'm fully myself? You notice whether effort flows both ways, whether curiosity is mutual, whether presence is matched. And if it's not, you don't force a story, you let it be what it is. This is the real end of the chase, not withdrawal, not indifference, but grounded choice. You choose connection that moves on its own. You choose people who don't require persuasion. You choose dynamics where interest doesn't need explanation. Here's the final truth. The day you stop trying to be chosen is not the day you give up on love. It's the day you stop chasing what can't meet you. It's the day you stop mistaking effort for intimacy. And it's the day you create space for something different to appear. Something reciprocal, something steady, something that moves without being pushed. Love that needs to be chased never arrives, but love that moves toward you doesn't need convincing. And once you understand that, you don't feel behind anymore. You feel aligned. And alignment doesn't rush, it recognizes. There's one last shift that happens when you truly stop trying to be chosen. It's subtle, but once it happens, you can't reverse it.
You stop asking what you should do differently to be wanted, and you start noticing how differently you show up when you're not negotiating your worth. You speak more honestly, you move more slowly, you don't rush emotional closeness just to secure connection. And because of that, the connections that do form feel quieter, but deeper. This is where patience changes meaning. Not patience that waits in hope, patience that waits in self-respect. You're no longer waiting for someone to decide your value. You're allowing time to reveal alignment. And alignment doesn't require chasing. It reveals itself through ease. You also stop romanticizing effort. You no longer tell yourself that love should feel confusing or heavy or emotionally exhausting. You realize that intensity without clarity was never depth. It was imbalance. And imbalance always demands more from you than it gives back. At this stage, something stabilizes. You don't feel rushed to find love, but you're not closed to it either. You're simply grounded. Grounded enough to walk away from what feels uncertain. Grounded enough to stay present when something feels mutual. And grounded enough to trust that you don't need to chase what's meant to meet you. This is why the day you stop trying to be chosen isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with peace. A quiet confidence that says, I don't need to be convincing to be worthy. I don't need to pursue what doesn't move. I don't need to shrink to be kept. And from that place, love looks different. It's not something you run after. It's something you recognize when it arrives. Because it doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It meets you where you already stand. And that's the difference most people never experience. Not because it's rare, but because it only appears after the chase ends.
He wasn't depressed. He wasn't sad. He wasn't angry. He was just empty. And emptiness is far more dangerous than pain. Because pain at least reminds you that something is alive inside you. But emptiness? It means the light inside you has faded so slowly that you didn't even notice when it went out. Every man reaches a moment in his life where he looks around and realizes everything is fine, and yet nothing feels real. He wakes up, but doesn't feel awake. He eats, but doesn't taste anything. He smiles, but it never touches his eyes. He works, but feels no purpose. He looks in the mirror and sees a stranger wearing his face. This is the kind of emptiness no one talks about. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It's a quiet erosion. A slow leaking of life, one drop at a time. The world around him keeps moving, fast, bright, noisy, while he feels like a ghost walking through it, half present, half missing, half alive. The strangest part? From the outside, nothing looks wrong. He has a roof, he has a phone, he has food, he has responsibilities. He has routines. In fact, that's the problem. His life has turned into one long, repeating loop of survival, but not living. He goes through the motions so perfectly that not a single person would ever guess that inside him there is a quiet collapse. Most men don't know how to describe this feeling, because emptiness isn't an emotion. It's the absence of emotion. It's the moment life stops hurting, not because the pain went away, but because he stopped feeling anything at all. And aren't taught how to deal with that. They're taught how to hide it. Since childhood, they hear, "Be strong. Don't cry. Handle it. Don't be weak." So they grow up learning to swallow their feelings whole. They learn to bury their exhaustion under silence. They learn to pretend everything is okay, even when their soul is screaming. They learn to carry their pain like a backpack of bricks while smiling for the world. Until one day, the weight becomes so familiar, they forget what it feels like to live without it. You see, emptiness doesn't show up suddenly. It builds slowly, quietly, softly, like dust collecting on a shelf. You don't notice it for months, maybe years, until one day you wake up and realize the weight of it is crushing you. Why does it happen? Simple. Men today are overstimulated, but underfulfilled. He scrolls for hours, consuming thousands of images, ideas, stories, reels, but none of them fill him. He keeps chasing dopamine highs, but every high leaves him emptier than before. He talks to people online, but none of them know him. Not really. He gets notifications, but never feels wanted. He is surrounded by noise, but starved of meaning. He has access to everything except himself. And that is where the real damage begins. Because emptiness isn't caused by lack of things. It's caused by lack of connection. Connection to purpose, connection to passion, connection to self. He stopped listening to his own thoughts. He stopped chasing his own dreams. He stopped feeling his own emotions. He became the version of himself the world wanted him to be, and in the process, he lost the version of himself he was meant to become. Think about it. How long has he been running on autopilot? How long has he been saying, "I'm fine," when he knows he's not? How long has he been carrying pain so silently that even he forgot where it came from? And here's the truth men never admit. He's exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Carrying everything. For everyone. All the time. Always being the strong one. Always being the responsible one. Always being the one who fixes things. Always being the one people call when they break. But never having someone to call when he breaks. You want to know why he feels empty? Because somewhere along the way, he stopped being a person and became a role. Provider, protector, problem solver. Everyone takes from him. Everyone expects from him. Everyone needs something from him. And he gives, and gives, and gives, until there's nothing left inside him to give, even to himself. This emptiness is not failure. It is exhaustion. A tired soul saying, "I've been carrying too much for too long." And yet, there's hope. Because emptiness is not the end of a man. It's the beginning of his rebirth. Men don't heal by escape. Men don't heal by numbing. Men don't heal by pretending. Men heal by reconnecting. Reconnecting with silence. Reconnecting with truth. Reconnecting with the small parts of life that once made them feel alive. Healing begins quietly, not by fixing everything in one day, but by fixing one small corner of life. One breath, one choice, one moment. He doesn't need motivation. He needs direction. He needs purpose. He needs honesty. He needs to ask himself the question he's been avoiding for years. What do I actually want? Not what his family wants. Not what society wants. Not what his past demands. Not what others expect. What does he want? Who is he when he's not performing? When he's not pretending? When he's not carrying everyone else's weight? That is where rebirth begins. The day he stops surviving and starts living. The day he stops running and starts feeling. The day he stops hiding and starts healing. Because he was never empty, he was just tired. And tired men don't need fixing. They need rebuilding. Gently, slowly, patiently. One honest moment at a time. You are not broken. You are not hopeless. You are not lost. You're exhausted. And exhaustion can be healed.